ended down in Jamaica. Of course, Marcus was from Jamaica. I met his son, Julius Garvey, back when I was president of the African American Chamber of Commerce. And I was asked to speak at a conference in Jamaica. And I had the privilege of meeting Julius and maintaining contact with him. He was on a conference call this year as we celebrated the anniversary of Marcus Garvey's birthday on August 17th. There was an all-day conference call. And I was there. I was on the call for about 3 hours talking about my knowledge of Marcus Garvey. But there were some folks on that call that knew much more about him than I did. And I really enjoyed that time talking and learning about Marcus Garvey. You should learn about Marcus Garvey as well. So our people began at that time to use stumbling blocks really as stepping stones. There were all kinds of barriers put in front of our people when it came to business development, business ownership, trading in the general marketplace, all of those kinds of things. They were stumbling blocks, but our people used them as stepping stones, and we need to understand that and do the same thing instead of just coming to a barrier or an obstacle and giving up. We can't give up. They didn't give up. If they had given up, where would we be? We talk a lot about, on Martin Luther King Day and Black History Month, we invoke all these names and say everything that they did and how we're so proud and everything. But what are we doing? Are we emulating them? Are we doing some of the things that they did? Are we taking it to another level? Or are we just giving up? And imagine what would have happened. Imagine where we would be if they had given up. Martin Luther King, Malcolm X, Marcus Garvey, Booker T. Washington, W.E.B. Du Bois, Philip Randolph, all of those folks we like to remember and celebrate. Suppose they had said, this stuff is too hard. I don't need to do this. I'll go get me a job. I don't need to be working for you. It's hard working for your people, black folks. The retirement plan is not that great. And if you think about it, I've done some research on black men who have worked for economic empowerment. And I plan at some point, when I have some more time, I don't know where I'm going to get that, to write a book titled If I Should Die on My Way to Freedom. And it chronicles the lives of many, many men who worked for economic empowerment, worked toward that, and who died before the age of 60. And it's eerie when you look at the long list of men who either died under mysterious circumstances or were assassinated because, obviously because they were trying to work for black people. It's rough out there, y'all, working for black folks. But some of us are called to do that. I call those, including myself, tree shakers. And if you get my new book, Black Empowerment with an Attitude, read the epilogue and you will see in the epilogue what I call, how I characterize that whole notion of working for our people. Because there's not a lot of return for that, believe me. But in the long run, we'll get our reward, even if the reward is in our children and grandchildren. That makes it all worthwhile. But there's a long list of black men who died prior to the age of 60. I mean, as far back as David Walker, who was poisoned, they say, because he wrote the book, David Walker's Appeal. And you bring it forward in modern history, you can see people like Mickey Leland and Marcus Garvey, Malcolm X, Martin Luther King, of course, Medgar Evers, I said Mickey Leland, Ken Bridges, dear friend of mine, assassinated, age 53. Right here in Cincinnati, Mark Pastor died. I think he was 41. Craig Edwards, he was 53 when he died. And all of these brothers, understood that freedom wasn't free, and they worked in any capacity they could to bring about economic empowerment. Look at Big Daddy Chun, you remember him? He used to always talk about economics and how important it was. I think he was maybe 51, he may have been younger than that. But there are many across the country. Ron Brown, you know how mysterious his death was. This guy was on his way to what some said the first black president back then. And all of a sudden he's in a plane and plane crashes. And they say that there was a bullet hole in his head. I didn't see it, but that's what they say. Again, mysterious circumstances. around the deaths of brothers who work for economic empowerment. Khalid Muhammad. And this guy, you see this guy, he was in the best shape, it seems to me, physically, you know, and he dies all of a sudden, mysteriously. So, Fred Hampton, we know about him. The list goes on and on. But in spite of all of that, these men and women fought for our people and fought for the right to do business, as well as the right to vote and public accommodations and everything else. Even without government support, there was no government support for black folks back then, in spite of the fact that the government always gave out subsidies to their folks. They controlled the government. Carnegie Steel, U.S. Steel, the railroads, and in modern history, Chrysler and all that. And now they're trying to figure out how they're going to do it again, bail out the auto industry. So that's called, what do they call that? Subsidies. But when it goes to black folks, it's called welfare. In spite of threats and intimidation and political exclusion, black people did fantastic work in the business field. You look at some of the particular folks. One stands out, S.B. Fuller. He was in the hair care cosmetic industry in Chicago and did fantastically well with his business. He was the mentor of Joe Dudley, who owns Dudley Products now down in Kernersville, North Carolina. Joe Dudley gives all the credit for his success to S.B. Fuller. And that's the kind of connection that we need to make today. We need to be mentors to one another in business, and we need to pass on information and expertise to one another so that we can keep the chain, the business chain, connected and strong, and have something to pass on to our children. I told you about Annie Minerva Turnbow Malone and Madam C.J. Walker, but there was another sister named Sarah Spencer Washington, who was also in the hair care and cosmetic business, did very well. There was Rose Morgan, A.G. Gaston, you probably know about him, out of Birmingham, Alabama. The money, in some cases, behind Martin Luther King. The man who wrote the checks to bail Martin Luther King out of jail sometime. A.G. Gaston understood that you had to have some money. If you're going to march and be out here doing civil rights work, you got to have some money. And A.G. Gaston was the money man. He's what I call a conscious capitalist. You know, we talk about raising our consciousness a lot, but we also have to keep in mind that we must raise capital. So we have to raise consciousness and capital at the same time. And when you have a conscious capitalist who is black, you have something on your hands. You have a very positive influence in the community, and you have a powerful force that you can rely on because he's going to do the right thing. He's conscious, or she's conscious. And you also have a very dangerous person to the establishment. A.G. Gaston established all kinds of businesses in Alabama, and the remnants of which are still there in Birmingham. So that's a person that we should all study and learn about. John Johnson, I told you, everybody from Anthony Johnson to John Johnson. John Johnson started his business with $500 that he borrowed from his mother. And he looked around in 1985, I think it was, his business was worth $500 million. So from $500 to $500 million. Of course, he died in recent years. I've forgotten the year, somewhere around 2000. Well, I'm not going to guess. You can look that up. But obviously what he did still exists. He passed it on to his daughter, and she's running the business now. Ebony and Jed, and he had a cosmetics company too, hair care, Ravine. I don't know if that's still in force, but he did fantastic things with very little money. And no subsidies, no loans, no welfare, no anything. He just did it from pure tenacity and drive and determination. Berry Gordy, we know about Berry Gordy, don't we? Motown. His family had a pool of money, and you had to go, and family members had to go and present their business ideas to the family. He was turned down the first time, I heard, and then he went back again, improved his plan, and went back and got his $800, and the rest is history when it comes to Motown. He sold Motown for $61 million. But then the group that he sold it to, I think it was Polygram, They sold it for $325 million. Can you imagine that? In about 2 years, I think. I don't know if Berry Gordy made his move too soon, but I mean, what are you going to do? $61 million, I mean, that's nothing to sneeze at either. But it shows you how business works. Berry Gordy was indeed one of our, and still is, of course, one of our most famous entrepreneurs. And then we had a guy named Reginald Lewis, who came along in 1987 and had the audacity, that's a word that's going around now, the audacity to think he could buy TLC Beatrice Foods for $1 billion. And he did it through a leveraged buyout. And then he wrote a book called Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun? Of course, he died too, before the age of 60. There's a museum in Baltimore that you can go and learn about Reginald Lewis and all the things that he did. So all of this has brought us up to the modern era where we can see business, black business all the time if we would just look. But there's so much more that we should be doing. We should be teaching entrepreneurship on every level to our children and getting them involved or exposing them to the opportunity of starting their own businesses so that they can become the S.B. Fullers and the Annie Minerva Turnbow Malones of their time. And we have to make a concerted effort to do that so that we will not break that chain. You know, they say a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. We don't want to be that weak link in this generation in which we live. So I encourage you to learn as much as you can about the history of black business in this country. One specific period of time that I want to draw your attention to is 1921. And this is a period after several years of prosperity in a place called Black Wall Street in Tulsa, Oklahoma. Some of you have heard about it now, but you've only heard about it recently. Now, some older people may have known about it, but this was something, what took place there was covered up for many, many, many years. It happened on May 30th, 1921, when Black Wall Street was invaded and destroyed by a white mob under false pretenses. They say it was because, you know, the old excuse, black man touches white woman excuse. But that was really not, if you do your research, you'll see that that was not the precipitating incident that started this riot. And back then, a riot was white folks killing black people. Have you heard about the 1863 draft riots? White people killing black people. That was when the draft was instituted during the Civil War. And rich folks, quote unquote, could pay $300 and not go, not be drafted. The poor white people, especially the Irish people in New York, couldn't afford $300, and they didn't want their sons going to the Civil War. They didn't want them to be drafted. Nothing they could do about it, they didn't have the $300. So what did they do? They marched up north in New York City, up toward Harlem, and started beating up and killing black people. Can you imagine that? You don't like what your government did by instituting a $300 draft fee exemption or draft exemption fee, so you go beat up some black people. You go kill some black people. I mean, that's just a graphic illustration of what we've been through in this country. We didn't write the rule. We didn't make the law. We can't pay the $300 either. But we take the brunt of the frustration and the outrage of some white people who are upset because they have to pay $300 and can't afford it. I got off on a tangent, as I usually do sometimes, but that's amazing to me. You need to read about the 1863 draft riot and learn a little bit about that as well. But this notion of entrepreneurship in the modern era should be taught and learned, especially this period of time in which the Tulsa riot took place. And like I said, it was on May 30th, 1921, that a white mob decided to go in and to kill black people in Tulsa, in the Greenwood district of Tulsa, and to burn down the businesses, some 600 as estimated black-owned businesses in that particular section of Tulsa, Oklahoma. Officially, 300 people were killed, but unofficially many more than that were killed. Right now, today, there was a geological survey done